long, long time ago, in a China far, far away, the Zhou dynasty was in trouble. The capital was on fire, and the king was big dead, so it was up to the nobles to figure out what to do next. They picked a new king and a new capital, but things could never go back to normal. The nobles were kingmakers now, and they used that power to weaponize the monarchy against one another, constantly fighting over who gets to be the king's quote-unquote protector. For hundreds of years, they stepped on the king's head, trying to lift themselves up higher. And little by little, the king's crown sank into the mud until the monarchy was so useless, they set aside the formalities and started punching each other in the face. The Zhou dynasty continued to exist on paper for centuries, but the land was ruled by dozens of warring states. These wars continued until one centralized state with a professional army swept through and gobbled up all of the others. And in this 5-paragraph essay, I will argue that the same thing happened in Europe. It's no secret that Europe liked to fight with itself, and everybody and their brother has claimed to be some kind of new Roman Empire, but that's not what I'm talking about. This is a map of medieval Europe, and it may look normal, perhaps even familiar, but one of these kingdoms is secretly 1,600 countries in a trench coat. It starts when Europe's second favorite child predator makes a deal with its first. Anybody messes with him, you're gonna mess with me. Thank you, Charlemagne! By the power vested in me by Jesus, you are a holy Roman emperor now. Charlemagne is a mighty ruler, and much like a Roman emperor, he owns all the land. Being Duke Weichai of Backpfeifengeist is nice, but it doesn't entitle you to anything, it just means you have a job. But Charlemagne, oh dear, dies. A generation later, his empire splits into 3. The left side becomes France, the right side Germany, and there's some land in the middle they can fight over for 1,000 years. Over on the Germany side of things, his family, oh dear, they all die. We've got to have a new king somehow, and so the nobles choose a new one. Aha! A pattern emerges. The German nobility give their king a few terms and conditions. Number 1, Lord of Purzelbaum isn't a job anymore, it's a title. It has land, and it goes straight from father to son, no ifs, ands, or buts from the king. Number 2, you know what's not hereditary anymore? The King of the Germans. Every single king has to get elected by the nobles to get the job, and that means every single king has to renegotiate the terms and conditions. So in France and England, the monarchy is gaining more and more power with every generation. Not so in Germany. But wait. The Germans are clever. Otto the Great comes to power, and he sees a way to turn this whole situation around, stop Germany from ever turning into the warring states. He wants to do things the Charlemagne way. He makes himself a holy Roman emperor, and he wants his lands to be run by somebody he can hire and fire. But no matter who he gives the land to, they're going to flip out if they can't give it to their kids, and then all of the nobles are gonna rise up against the emperor. But what if he gave it to somebody who couldn't have kids? It's a nice thought, but where in medieval Europe are you going to find permanently celibate men who are educated enough to run a kingdom? Well, hello, boys. A little birdie told me Jesus wants you to have this. Otto begins hiring bishops to be his underlings. When they die, all of their land goes back to Otto, at which point Otto can choose any member of the clergy to replace them. And the bishops are all too happy to oblige. One challenge: bishops don't just listen to the emperor, they also listen to the Pope. But it's a calculated risk. At this point in time, the Pope is hardly in charge of himself. The papacy is going through a phase known as the pornocracy, where the Pope can be bought and sold by the most powerful person in the city of Rome. Hey, wait a minute! Otto swoops in and becomes the most powerful man in Rome. The Pope dies, doing what he loved, another man's wife. Presto agitato, Otto picks the new Pope. With the Pope in their back pockets, the Ottonian dynasty can give away as much land as they want to the bishops and undermine the church and the German nobles at the same time. This worked brilliantly for quite a while, until the Italians stole back the papacy. They want control over the bishops again, and the German nobles want control of the land, so they team up. The Pope and the German nobles joined forces against the Holy Roman Emperors and managed to not wrest back control of the bishops entirely, but to make electing bishops a very tedious and expensive task that required both the Pope and the Emperor to go, "Come on, here boy, Here, boy. Who's my buddy? To try and win them over. Oops. Now the royal family in Germany just died out again, and the nobles are all fighting.
They're fighting over who gets to be king. They're fighting over how much they should listen to the Pope. They're fighting over who called dibs on such and such county, and then they're fighting some more. Germany is quickly sliding back towards the warring states. At least they got some pretty sick castles out of it, like this one. And this one. The HRE seriously armed itself to the teeth. Like, this is enormous and on top of a mountain, and still they kept adding new wings and a few extra murder holes, and I guess it pays to be paranoid because that's how this one survived 900 years. I'm actually making plans to go there, and you can join me. This September, 8-day field trip, Germany and Austria. Early bird discounts still available. Pretzels in Munich, world's biggest fangirl shrine, that medieval castle, Habsburg palaces and jewels, but I'm getting ahead of the timeline here. The Germans are clever.
Emperor Frederick Barbarossa claims the throne. He can't fire his lords, his bishops are a headache, and his army isn't big enough to outright conquer Germany. But what if he had Scrooge McDuck levels of money? But where to get it? Italy is just as much of a mess as Germany at the time, except it has lots of money and no king to organize its defense. Barbarossa takes over Italy to get more monies, and you know what? This place isn't bad. His descendant Frederick II flips the script. Instead of using Italy to get control of Germany, he starts giving away power in Germany for the sake of controlling Italy. And then, oops! That dynasty dies out at the exact moment that Frederick II has given the nobles even more power than before. The nobles elect some random guy from out of town to be their emperor and defend the empire if things ever get bleak, but be real, who are they gonna defend themselves from? France and England are fighting each other, everyone in the east is too afraid of the Mongols to make a move. What they're really voting for is an emperor who will stay out of their way while they start punching each other in the face. But even after 2 centuries of punching, the Holy Roman Empire was still no closer to being a real country. There were 1,600 kingdoms and duchies and princedoms and counties and city-states and prince-bishoprics, and not a single one of them could claw enough power to conquer the others. But the Germans are clever. What if somebody could win not by building castles, but by building alliances? If someone could get their finger in every single pie, if they negotiated with every elected bishop, if they had relatives in every major family, and a dragon's hoard of money to pay off the rest, they could seize control of the empire through the power of cooperation. That someone was the Habsburgs, and they were immensely successful. The Habsburgs married into practically every royal family on the planet. They knew how to play the game better than anyone. It was a complicated patchwork piece for a complicated patchwork empire, but in 1495, they successfully outlawed the Holy Roman Empire from going to war with itself. And in some ways, this patchwork approach was doing better than the rest of Europe. When everybody else was doing civil wars over Protestantism versus Catholicism, the Habsburgs decided that every one of those 1,600 states inside of the Holy Roman Empire could just do whatever, man. But the warring states had only been put on pause. The emperor still didn't get to do as much as the King of France or whatever. He was only powerful because he gave everybody else what they wanted, and because his family happened to rule over Austria and Bohemia, and the Netherlands, and Spain, and Portugal, and half of Italy, and the entire Western Hemisphere. Wait a second, that is definitely enough to take back power in Germany. Thus spoke Emperor Ferdinand II, and in 1618 he decides it's time to start acting like an emperor again. And the first thing he does is say, "Tough luck, Bohemians, you're Catholics now." That went over about as well as you would expect. The Habsburgs and the Catholic half of the empire went to war against the Protestant half of the empire. The Habsburgs had the money and the manpower to handle it, but there was one fatal flaw. Not only had they married outside of the Holy Roman Empire into every royal family on the planet, but other royal families had married into the Holy Roman Empire. So their war against half of Germany turned into a war against half of Europe. 30 years and the deadliest war Europe had ever done. Later, the Habsburgs achieved absolutely nothing, and any future attempts to make the emperorship mean something would bring the whole continent down on them. There may have been a Holy Roman Emperor for another 2 centuries, but the empire was functionally dead. The warring states were back on. Again, hundreds of states of all shapes and sizes, but there were 2 headliners. Prussia and Austria devoured the carcass of the Holy Roman Empire from the inside until every other state fell under their influence. But there could be only one Germany. In Austria, the Habsburgs planned their wedding parties and baby showers as fast as they could. Now hurry and get my husband in here. I need 8 more within the decade. But Prussia had a different idea. A centralized state. A professionalized army. Ringing any bells? Looks like conquest. It's back on the menu. It's China all over again. But the Germans gotta be clever one last time, because the last time they went around punching each other in the face, they got nowhere. So besides swinging around the biggest army, Prussia unwarred the states in record time with a final secret ingredient. A new national identity, rooted in ideals that every German could support. The French.
Prost! Prussia unites Germany, and the Habsburgs get shoved out to play with Hungary and their other red-headed stepchildren. One World War I later, it all comes crashing down. Austria rebrands as a republic and confiscates all of the Habsburgs' toys so that tourists can rubberneck at the wreckage of an empire. And that's where our September trip ends, wandering the 1,400 rooms of Schönbrunn Palace, gawking at Maria Theresa's sarcophagus, and ogling at the crown and scepter that barely held together Europe's warring states for 1,000 years. Check the link in the description for a full itinerary, and let's raise a toast in a Viennese cafe, huh?